Hey fight fans, welcome to MMA Daily, your go-to source for the latest news, fight analyses, and exclusive interviews in mixed martial arts. Hit subscribe and join us as we step into the cage together. Starting off, Dana White takes aim at Francis Ngannou, claims the UFC nearly cut Francis Ngannou after loss to Derrick Lewis. Moving on, Khamzat Chimaev claims he's getting paid more than most champions at UFC 308. Next, Dana White rips PFL's Donn Davis over latest event comparisons. Moving on, Israel Adesanya predicts Robert Whittaker versus Khamzat Chimaev at UFC 308. Lastly, Max Holloway slams Ilia Topuria for being Conor McGregor copycat. UFC CEO Dana White has continued to take aim at Francis Ngannou. White and Ngannou hadn't seen eye to eye well before Francis left the UFC to sign with the PFL and box. But following the Power Slap event on Thursday, White was speaking to the media and claimed he nearly cut Ngannou before he became the heavyweight champ. Francis is all about the money. Francis left because he knew if he fought Jon Jones and didn't win, it would hurt his chances of making the money he wanted to make. But realistically, his deal was bigger here. His deal was bigger here had he stayed in the UFC. It doesn't matter to me one way or another. I was going to cut Francis when he lost 2 in a row. I was going to cut him after the Derrick Lewis fight. Someone around here begged me not to do it. There is a much deeper story to this whole thing, and he would have made more money had he stayed in the UFC. He didn't want to fight Jon Jones, that's a fact, and we are moving on. It's an interesting comment from Dana White that he nearly cut Francis Ngannou from the UFC. His loss to Derrick Lewis was lackluster as neither threw much volume and it was a boring fight. The loss also dropped Ngannou to 6-2 in the UFC, but the UFC opted not to release him. Ngannou ended up going on a 6-fight winning streak to end his UFC tenure. That also included him becoming the heavyweight champ and defending the belt once. Following Francis Ngannou leaving the UFC to box and sign with the PFL, he claimed his earnings were multiple times more than what he made in the UFC. However, White says that isn't true, and he was offered more money in the UFC than he made in either of his boxing fights. I know all the you people don't know, and I don't care what everybody says. It doesn't matter to me, but that's a fact. He was offered more money because I know the real numbers. Ultimately, Ngannou made his decision and went 0-2 in boxing before making his return to MMA last week and scoring a TKO win over Renan Ferreira. Khamzat Chimaev is getting paid at UFC 308. Khamzat is set to return to the octagon in the co-main event of UFC 308 against Robert Whittaker. It's a highly anticipated bout and one that is key for the division. Although Khamzat is not the champion, or a former champion for that matter, he claims he's making more than most champions are for this fight and going forward. I'm happy with the money. I'm making more money than any champions. Money is not changing me. People will be the same. I'm staying humble as I was before. Although Khamzat Chimaev claims he's getting paid more than UFC champions, it's uncertain if that is actually true. UFC salaries aren't publicly disclosed, but Khamzat says the layoff doesn't impact him due to how much money he is making per fight. Khamzat Chimaev is set for his first fight in a year against Robert Whittaker at UFC 308. It will be the toughest test of his career. However, Khamzat has full confidence he will be able to take Whittaker down at will to control him for the win. Who did stop my takedowns? Nobody. I don't think this guy will be different. Kamaru Usman, he's a great champion and he took down everyone. But I took him down, I dominated him in the rounds, easy. What's going to be different with Taekwondo or Karate Guy? He knows how to lose, we don't know, so I'm ready for victory. If Khamzat beats Robert Whittaker at UFC 308, it would be a statement win and could earn the undefeated fighter a title shot. Should Khamzat win, it will also boost his popularity and could also allow him to make even more money going forward. UFC CEO Dana White quickly responded to PFL founder Donn Davis's latest claims, comparing the two top MMA organizations. White and the UFC are hours away from one of their biggest cards of the year in Abu Dhabi. UFC 308 is headlined by a featherweight title clash between Ilia Topuria and Max Holloway. The UFC's latest pay-per-view event comes just days after the PFL hosted its Battle of the Giants event in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Francis Ngannou made his long-awaited return to MMA, finishing 2023 PFL title winner Renan Ferreira in the first round. Davis claimed that Ngannou's MMA return trended higher than any UFC event in 2024, but he refused to share the pay-per-view numbers for the event. During the Power Slap 9 post-match press conference, White responded to Davis's claims. The PFL should keep the UFC out of their mouth. They can't even deal with Power Slap. Power Slap destroys PFL. That guy shouldn't even mention the UFC. He's not even in Power Slap's orbit. He doesn't beat Power Slap in revenue, ticket sales, sponsorships, anything. Let alone the UFC, all of their good people want to be here anyway, so I'd imagine that eventually, yes, they'll be here. No one wants to fight in the PFL except for Francis Ngannou. The final comment above by White concerns Bellator lightweight champion Usman Nurmagomedov's proclamation that he'll sign with the UFC within 2 years. Davis has since promised to keep Usman happy. Former UFC middleweight champion Israel Adesanya isn't expecting Robert Whittaker versus Khamzat Chimaev to go the full distance at UFC 308. Whittaker and Chimaev battle in a potential #1 contender fight at UFC 308 this Saturday in Abu Dhabi. The co-main event is one of the most anticipated co-headliners in recent memory based on the decorated runs of both stars. Fighters, pundits, and fans are split evenly as to who they believe will emerge victorious in Whittaker versus Chimaev. However, a common theme emerges, and that is that Whittaker will need to stifle Chimaev's wrestling for his best chance to win. Adesanya is picking Whittaker, his two-time rival, to hand Khamzat his first career loss. I just think Rob is a guy not to be Look at his last fight. Hopefully, people will remember who he is now. I think Rob will do it again. Definitely not as early. I don't think so. I just think he'll catch him later on. But he has to weather the storm. He has to survive until he can't. I'm gonna go Rob with this one with the late finish. Round 4, Adesanya's prediction is similar to Max Holloway's. While Holloway didn't predict an exact method round, he picked Whittaker to win. Whittaker enters UFC 308 with a lot of momentum after defeating Paulo Costa and Ikram Aliskerov earlier this year. He was supposed to face Chimaev at UFC Saudi Arabia in June before Khamzat withdrew due to illness. Khamzat returns to middleweight after defeating Kamaru Usman in his divisional debut at UFC 294. But Max Holloway believes Ilia Topuria is trying to be Conor McGregor light. Holloway is ready to challenge Ilia for the UFC Featherweight Championship this Saturday. The title fight will headline UFC 308 in Abu Dhabi. This is Holloway's bid to become a two-time champion in the 145-pound division. There has been some back-and-forth trash talk between the two, and Max believes Ilia is trying to imitate Conor McGregor. During a media scrum, Max Holloway discussed Ilia trying to label himself a BMF. He said Ilia hasn't earned that distinction and would rather be a Conor McGregor ripoff. It just makes no sense. To me, I don't think he deserves, you've got to earn that right. I mean, you guys know the guy he's copycatting. This guy is a copycat down to his tattoos, to his aura, to the way he's approaching fights. The guy is a copycat. At the end of the day, I think you've got to earn that moment, and I believe he could have earned it with Josh Emmett. If you guys go back to that fight and watch what happened, when Josh Emmett tried to swing, someone shot, and someone held someone down for the rest of the fight. He's already trying to steal one person's aura, and now he's trying to steal somebody else's thing. This will be Ilia's first attempt at a successful UFC title defense. He hasn't been shy in telling fans just how good he is, and there will be pressure fighting a future Hall of Famer in Holloway. Thanks for tuning in to MMA Daily. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more daily MMA content. Until next time, keep fighting the good fight.